Do we have a proper name for this yet?
Motor City Metrics podcast.
No, no. The Monday show.
No
All right. Well,
Monday
we'll
Monday City
Oh,
Metrics.
Monday City
no.
Metrics. I like it. There we go. Let's welcome in everybody to our supplemental, our Monday supplemental broadcast, the Monday City Metrics. I am your host tonight, Chris Brown. Alongside me are Uper and John. And I wasn't here on Thursday, so I'd like to pop in just to say hello and participate in this one. But yeah, we're just gonna keep it relatively tidy tonight. A tidy hour, 60 minutes, um, talking the last four games for the Tigers. Some of the trade deadline rumors coming up, maybe a little prospect promotion stuff. But yeah, as always, thanks everybody for tuning in. Follow us on the various channels that you do, podcasts, Spotify, whatever. And then on Twitter, that always helps, right? Or whatever the hell it's called now. Um, on Threads, maybe one day, a Blue Sky, all that good stuff. But yeah, so I guess we'll start from the beginning, guys. I didn't wasn't there on Thursday, but the Tigers were coming off a really nice 5-2 road trip, hosting San Diego for 3 and San Francisco for the completion of an earlier, uh, you know, canceled game. So they go 2-2. Just kind of curious your thoughts on the weekend, the long weekend as a whole.
Well, for San Diego, it was really interesting those first two games. I mean, you got a sense of how much talent, at least premium talent, that they have, more so than the Tigers, and it showed on the field. I mean, the Tigers rallied in the first game and made it a 5-4 one-run game, a loss, and then they got blown out in game two. You could see, when you talk about Manny Machado and Juan Soto and Xander Bogaerts and Fernando Tatis, there's just guys up and down that lineup that can hurt you. It's mystifying that they're below 500, but they are. But when you get them on any given day, they can knock 14 runs on you, and they did to the Tigers. But hey, Detroit fought back, pitched a nice game on Sunday, got one win out of there, and then came out today. And Tarek Skubal looked like a guy, and the good kind of guy. Pretty impressive.
An actual dude.
Yes.
Yeah, it was funny. I as I said, I was all prepared to do Thursday show. I just couldn't do it. But my good for that show was going to be the Padres offense, which had been top 3 in baseball over the last month, and then my bad was going to be the Padres record, which was like 11-14 heading into that somehow. But I mean, yeah, that Friday night game was mostly that was just the Juan Soto show, right? He hit 7,000 feet of home runs, and that's the Tigers clawed back, but couldn't quite get there. I don't know, John. Did you have any thoughts on that one?
I mean, yeah, Skubal obviously looked good. It's crazy to me because he looked so good his first couple starts, then got shelled for I think it was 7 runs against the Royals, then went back to looking really good today. Struck out 9 through 5 scoreless innings. But to me, the big takeaway is the Tigers 2, 3, 4 hitters. Green, Torkelson, and Kerry Carpenter, all 25 years and younger. They have all been really impressive. I think they've been the Tigers' 3 best hitters this year. And it really makes you wonder what these 3 could do long term if they're able to stay healthy, because obviously Kerry Carpenter was injured for a bit. Riley Green was injured for a bit. But yeah, they've been really fun to watch. Riley Green with 3 more hits today. Carpenter had 2 hits as well today. Torkelson 2 hits as well. So they've been really fun to watch, and we're going to get to Kerry Carpenter later in the show. But having these 3 young guys here gives you a little hope for the future. And I think Kerry Carpenter is starting to make a name for himself as a guy that maybe could be a long-term piece for the Tigers. Maybe it's as a platoon as a DH, but I think he's been really, really impressive, and I hope he's able to continue to keep it up. And even Alex Faedo, who had a really good start against the Padres, was able to shut them down, I think. With the Tigers likely trading Lorenzen and Eduardo Rodriguez, I think he's going to get an opportunity throughout the end of the season. He's 27 years old, so I'm not saying the time is necessarily ticking on him, but it'll be interesting to see if he can really establish himself as something for the Tigers, whether it's a back end of the rotation starter or maybe a long reliever. But it was good to see him have a good start as well.
Yeah, you can really start to feel that core 3 as sort of the heart of a future contender. You can start to see it. Riley Green is just this elite hitter, if you will. Like, I don't know, maybe elite's a little bit much, but you see he can just make contact with everything, and he just gets hits.
Yeah.
And he has some pop in the bat, but he's mostly he's going to be your hitter, your on base guy, your setup man. And Torkelson has been knocking him down more often lately, which is nice to see. And then you got the sort of his left-handed counterpart there with Carpenter, who's a little bit of both. He can hit and he can hit for power. So it really is a nice feeling to have that sort of young core there, and you hope you can supplement it with 2 or 3 guys around them. That's why it was kind of odd to hear out of nowhere John Paul Morosi start just mention that teams were, interested in Gary Carpenter as like, okay, of course. He's like he's in his first year of playing and he's performing. I don't know why that would come up or why he decided to put that out. I don't think the Tigers would be entertaining thoughts of trading him unless you're getting a completely insane offer for somebody who's performing at the same level but is also playing like shortstop.
Right.
So I don't know. It's just a weird thing from JP.
And he chose the word robust. He said there was robust interest.
He's been hanging out with Lynn Henning.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that. That was very Lynn Henning-ish. But, if you just take him literally, and let's say he wasn't just trying to put a fancy word in, what is it really robust? And what are we talking? Is robust 4 teams asking about him in a week's time? It seems generally at the deadline, teams want, I hate the word proven, but they do kind of want proven talent, to make that run toward the playoffs. And that's not Gary Carpenter yet. I mean, that'd be a young guy. I mean, that's kind of a different tack to move someone like that this time of year. But I'm going to never say no guy until you know. You can't say no until you know. Well, what are they offering? I'd love to be in on those conversations.
Yeah, I think like the other thing too is you want to strike while the iron's hot. And if he's performing really, really well right now, I mean, he doesn't have that much major league experience. So I think it really comes down to the Tigers' evaluation of him, and do they believe he's going to continue to stay as an elite hitter as he's been, or do you think there's going to be a tail off? Because we've seen this, like he reminds me a lot of like a Brennan Bosch, the start to his career he had, really, really strong start, then kind of tailed off. Pitchers sort of figured him out. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Gary Carpenter, but you got to have that in the back of your mind, and maybe his trade value is the highest it's ever going to be. So I don't think it's crazy to look into that and like I said, strike while the iron's hot.
Well, they should be pursuing every avenue toward improvement needs to be run down, right? I mean, you can't automatically say no to just about any move right now. Whether that's trading their bullpen pieces, that's one thing that happened today. I don't know if you saw that trade.
Colorado.
The Braves got Pierce Johnson from Colorado. Now, again, this is fantasy baseball silliness, but I had Pierce Johnson, so I followed him pretty closely, right? And he got 11 saves, but he also got his ass kicked a lot. I mean, so
it's Colorado, but
yeah, but no, it wasn't just a Colorado effect. He was just bad quite a few nights, and then he had a lot of nights where he loaded up the bases and he squeezed out of it too. And he was very Valverde-ish, but he got the Braves number 10 rated prospect and the 26th rated prospect and this is Pipeline's numbers, but still, I mean, the number 10 prospect in the Braves system, you can debate how good the Braves system is after a lot of the moves they've made and the promotions they've made, but the guy is a reliever that throws 100 miles an hour. I mean, so that's pretty good for a Pierce Johnson, 32-year-old erratic reliever. So it makes you wonder, what could Jason Foley get?
I mean, Pierce Johnson, I was looking at his number. He has an ERA of 6. Now, he does have 58 strikeouts and 39 innings pitched, but that's crazy to think about. They got a top 10 prospect.
His ERA has actually come down in the last month. It was like 7.5, 8 for quite a while.
Pierce not a common name these days. There was Pierce on Community. There was Pierce in MASH. I can't think of any other Pierce. I mean, we talked about it. The relievers always tend to get more value than you would expect at the trade deadline, because teams are everybody needs relievers in the middle of the season. They want to strengthen their bullpen. They want to shorten games, all that stuff. I do think teams often do look for power bats, lefty power bat, something like that. That would explain why there would be interest in Carpenter, but it's so rare to see somebody with this little experience get moved at the trade deadline.
Right.
It's like, if he goes on to have like a Corey Dickerson career, gets traded 17 times, it wouldn't shock me. But Dickerson stuck with Colorado for a few years, I think, before he moved around. So, but yeah, I don't know. It does make me, like you said, it makes you wonder. Like, I don't think any of us really want the Tigers to trade Alex Lang or Jason Foley or any of these guys that they might have for 3-4 years. But if the price or if the return is intriguing, then you got to listen.
For me, the relievers, absolutely. If there's a good price, someone meets your price, you take it and run and make it work down the road. Kerry Carpenter, I'm a little less anxious to see them move unless it was something very, very attractive, because I do believe what John had mentioned earlier. You can kind of squint and envision the core of hitters developing and him being a part of that. Again, we're a long way from knowing, but at some point they have to build that core around, and they've had trouble adding to it. Now they have potentially 3 guys that you can build an offense around. You're going to need more. So I'm not sure something pretty attractive would have to come back to move Carpenter to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's to a certain extent, those 3 batters are starting to feel a little bit like what Tigers fans had hoped Manning, Skubal, and Mize would be for the rotation, right? Like, all right,
Yes.
these are our playoff game 1, 2, and 3 starters, and obviously it hasn't worked out. Skubal has been the best of them. Mize, of course, was injured, but there is some thoughts about Matt Manning possibly being a trade chip. We were discussing earlier that the Reds have made Jonathan India available according to MLB trade rumors. And it does pose some questions. Would it make any sense for the Tigers to swap Matt Manning for Jonathan India? What do you guys think?
Do you know how many years India has left of arbitration?
I believe India, this is his 3rd season, so he's either 3 years or 4 years left. I'll check right now.
I'm pretty sure he's a free agent in 26. I could be wrong, but he's also 26 years old, and Manning's 25 years old. I spent a lot of time thinking around with this today just because it did intrigue me. Most rumored trades, I have a pretty instant opinion, yes or no, on a lot of things. This one I actually kind of thought about for a while. It didn't race out at me as a yes or a no either way. I think at the end of the day, I like Manning more, but let's face it, he's never pitched a full season yet. He hasn't come particularly close to pitching a full season yet. So, we don't know what he'll look like over 175 innings in the big leagues, if he'll even make it through 175 innings in the big leagues in a season. So I think he's movable. And then you look at Jonathan India. I mean, he had the good rookie year, but overall in his 3 seasons now, he's been about a league average hitter. I think the OPS plus was like 103 or something like that. So he's a league average guy, but there's value to being a league average guy. I mean, there's nothing wrong with league average bat. That would add to your core. That would lengthen your lineup with what he can produce. So you hear conflicting things about his defense, but I think at the end of the day, he's a league average guy. Is that enough for Matt Manning? I think I might roll the dice and hope Matt Manning's a little better than league average.
Yeah, I think what you said about having strong opinions, I think I'm against this one just because Matt Manning is only 25 years old. Has thrown 185 career innings, so basically a full season. And yes, he hasn't been able to stay healthy, but if we are being fair, the injury that he sustained earlier this year was kind of like a freak accident. You can't really control that. And his ERA is 3.19. Now, whether you think that's going to continue, but that's very good. Now it's only 36 innings pitched, but him only being 25 years old, I would like to see another year or 2 out of him, but to know what we really have in him before we move him. And like you said, Jonathan India has been a league average hitter, and this kind of segues perfectly into another topic we had was Jace Jung, who was called up. I mean, if Jace Jung is up in the big league, I mean, he was drafted in 2022, so if he could maybe reach the Tigers by the end of next year, maybe 2025. I mean, can he be just as good, maybe even better than Jonathan India? I know Chris is our minor league guy, but when you have a guy like that kind of waiting in the wings, does it really make sense? Because that's the other thing too, is if you're going to trade Eduardo Rodriguez and Michael Lorenzen, what is your rotation going to look like next year? I mean, you're kind of banking on Mize, Manning, Skubal, and then maybe you look to free agency, but that's kind of my thoughts. Is you already have a second base prospect waiting in the wings who's performed pretty well, and I would like to see what Matt Manning, a young pitcher, can still do for the Tigers, considering they don't really have a lot of pitching prospects that are major league ready right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting question there because to me, kind of, they're basically the same player. Matt Manning is the pitching version of Jonathan India. I guess the difference is India had that really good rookie year, but since then he's just been kind of, middling but I will say in general that I would never not make a trade because of somebody I have in the minors. Uh, I am also happen to be one of the lowest people around on Jace Young, but even if you think that he's going to come up and be your starting second baseman in a couple years, I don't think that would stop you from trying to make your team better now. If worse comes to worse, you have Jonathan India playing really well for you in the majors, and you have Jace Young as a trade chip down the road, or vice versa. But
Mhm.
yeah, I don't think he's not the sort of player that really moves the needle for me either. Like it does feel like if you're going to trade somebody who, with many years of, I guess I would rather trade if you're going to trade a Manning or a Skubal or any of those guys where you have multiple years of control and they're going to be contributing to the big league club. I want higher rated prospects or more exciting players for that, right? Like just not just an average player. You need to shoot for the moon, I think. But we do. I mean, and I don't think we're going to see the Tigers make any big trades that beyond the guys with expiring contracts. But we don't know. We don't know. We don't know Scott Harris yet. One of the things we complained about a lot with Alavila, one of the many things we complained about, let's reminisce, was there was not a lot of creativity, right? They traded guys when there were expiring contracts because, that's what you do. But there wasn't a lot of, hey, let's move this guy in his second year for this guy with 3 years, but he might play this. The most creative they got was what, trading Paredes for Meadows,
Yeah,
maybe, and that didn't really,
threw a draft
obviously,
pick in there.
yeah,
Yeah,
you can't, in hindsight, of course, not great, but yeah,
they never did anything like become the third team to help get a deal, get a deal done between two others.
yeah,
Jump in, be the third team, see if you can get something for yourself out of it. Now, that was never going to happen in an Alavila world.
yeah, and remember how many? There was actually quite a few. There were actually quite a few 3-team deals under Dave Dombrowski.
Exactly.
You had the infamous Austin Jackson, Max Scherzer deal that involved the Yankees and the Diamondbacks, right?
Yep.
And then there was even Shane Green was a three-team deal, wasn't he? You got Didi Gregorius and I'm forgetting who went to
Robbie
who else
Ray.
was it?
Robbie
Ray, yeah.
Oh,
Oh, boy.
oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
And then also
David Price.
the
Price
trade
was-
deadline move with David Price and Austin Jackson and all those guys. That was
a 3-team.
Seattle, Tampa, Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, me and Uper talked about like them taking on a bad contract to get prospects in return. That's another thing that could be an option with all the money they have coming off the books. But we'll have to see. We just don't know yet.
Yeah, I mean, not to. It just occurs to me that it felt like Dave Dombrowski just went and there were players that he just wanted to get, and then he would figure out a way to get them. And if it involved a 3-team deal or 4-team deal or whatever, he'd do it. Now, again, this is mostly him acquiring pieces, whereas the Tigers now are kind of they're selling, so it's a little bit different. But we do remember the one time they did sell, they did pretty well with Michael Fulmer and Daniel Norris and Matthew Boyd. Like those guys were all. It didn't quite work out eventually, but they were all talented guys who helped. So, yeah, I'm really eager to see what Scott Harris and his front office can do with this trade deadline. If you just get the players for their expiring contracts, I get it, but it'd be kind of fun to see something more.
Yeah. Here's an idea I had because we talked about Tarek Skubal had another good start today. Is it a realistic? I don't think he's getting traded this trade deadline, but is there a possibility maybe in the offseason, or do you think he is a long-term piece for the Tigers? He's 26 years old. Do you think he's going to be at the top of the rotation 3-4 years from now? Are the Tigers maybe going to extend him? Like, what do you think his long-term outlook is for the Tigers? And is he a guy that they could maybe move in a couple years if he continues to pitch well?
And all of us, all kinds of Tiger Twitter followers are shooting arrows at you right now, John. And just get ready to take those. You know what, though? It's not a crazy idea. And in my opinion, pitchers break. We know this. We know he has had a Tommy John in his background. We know he had a surgery last year on his arm as well. So there's some wear and tear there. He's an electric pitcher. He's very impressive. However, in the off season, if some team comes sniffing around and they really think that he's the guy and they want to pay up for it, tell me what the price is. Tell me what I'm getting. But I think he is movable for that reason. They're getting Mize back. Most people come back from Tommy John surgery decently. So if they did move him for something attractive, I could see it. I don't expect it, but I could see it.
Yeah, it's tough. You look back and you wish the Tigers would have offloaded Fulmer and Boyd when they were younger and better and could have gotten more. At the same time, at a certain point, like, do you want to be the Rays as a franchise where you're trading, all your talented young players once they hit arbitration, or do you want to build around some guys? And it's hard because of those injuries. Like, you worry that Skubal's, you could just picture it. He's pitching well for this year, pitches well half of next year, gets Tommy John, he's out for a year and a half, comes back for like 1 year, and that's all you have from him. But yeah, I don't know. I would want, that's a guy that I would want a huge trade return for. Basically,
Yes.
that's the guy you send to okay, Baltimore, you want him? Give us, 5-year top 20 prospects,
Yeah.
something like that. We want you to single-handedly restock our farm system and give us an offense for the next couple of years.
Yeah, and that's no one is ever. Whenever we talk about these things, no one's certainly ever saying, "Hey, fire sale on Tarek Skubal." Right? You want something. It would be something very impressive that you could help build around. That's the whole idea.
Yeah. When you bring up like the Rays, though, like what they've done, it's worked. Like when you look at the Chris Archer trade, the Blake Snell trade, and the Blake Snell trade hasn't really worked out yet, but they've got some young pieces. Like if the Tigers are moving towards that, where they're going to keep a lower payroll and keep building through the draft, that could be an option for them. Is they have these young pitchers, they bring them up, they have a few good seasons, and then they get a massive haul for them, and they keep kind of rebuilding and retooling through that.
Yeah, I don't dispute that the Rays do things very smart. They're very intelligent. They win a lot of their trades. They really target guys and know how to fix them. Like Junior Caminero, they got for nobody, and then turned him into a top 10 prospect. It's absurd, but I don't know how much that's good for the fans, right? Like at a certain point, you can go too far with it, where you're locking down Miguel Cabrera for 45 years or whatever, but you kind of do that for the fans, right? It's you love your players and you want these guys to be a part of your team going forward. You've had Tigers growing up that he followed. We had Tigers growing up that we followed. It's I don't know. It's just tough to get yourself, like, if the Rays go and trade Shane McClanahan 2 years from now, like, well, that maybe that's a smart thing to do. You get a bunch of good prospects back, but wouldn't it be fun to have a homegrown guy who's kind of with you for a decade or so? It's, they did it with Evan Longoria, but that's it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just the way. Maybe that's the way Harris is going to operate. Maybe that's the way Illich wants him to operate. It's just, I wouldn't hate it if they want to,
Well, just
Riley Green and Skubal and build around them.
From Tampa's perspective, it would be interesting to move them to a market and a stadium in an area that cared, right? Because Tampa, where the stadium is brutal. It's in a bad part of town where nobody can. I'm not saying it's dangerous. It's just in a part of town where you can't reach it very easily. And it's a transplant kind of area. People who bring their allegiances with them. So, they don't have to care about the fans that much there. They just kind of operate in their own little bubble and build their team the way they want, and they win a hell of a lot of games. If you brought them, let's say they moved to Nashville and the Nashville community needed to gel around them, would the good folks of Nashville care about who's there, or would they just care about, hey, this team wins no matter how they do it? We don't know that.
I mean, I just look at the Red Sox, right? They brought in Chaim Bloom basically to be the Rays with money, and the first thing he did, he traded Mookie Betts, which you could argue that it made sense. They needed to get some money off the payroll, or they didn't want to lock him up forever. But Mookie Betts, that's like one of the 5 best players of the last 15 years or so. That, like,
sure,
that would be tough. That would be tough to have a guy like Justin Verlander in his prime. We did see that, right? They traded him away. That was a real bummer. And that was even, you could argue he was past his prime before we realized that the Tigers hadn't fixed him and the Astros could. But yeah, I don't know if fans generally want. I don't know. There are certain fans who would just be fine with winning, right? That's cool. I think there are a lot of fans that are casual to sort of intermediate that want to root for their players too. So
Hey, you're right, and I go back and forth on it. I like it's a good thing you brought up. Players I followed growing up. My dog is named Sweet Lou, for Christ's sake.
yeah,
I mean that's not because I knew some guy named Lou living down the street, right? That's Lou Whitaker. So yeah, I can hear that, but I know who I am now. For me, it's just win. I don't care who's wearing that uniform. Just build something that wins. That's why if I had the team I followed the second most over the last 10 to 15 years has been the Rays. That's kind of my second club. And when the Tigers are down, I follow the Rays. And for this reason is they figure out really inventive ways to win. And I hope Scott Harris has some of that with him.
Yeah, I think that's the question that's going to be is, do you trade those guys or do you pay those guys? Like we had a comment, do you pay Skubal, Mize, Manning, keep them around long term? Same thing with Riley Green. We haven't seen the Tigers, give out those, rookie extensions yet. I think that's the debate that's going to be had, and we're going to find out the next couple of years.
Here's one thing that's coming up with all the injuries that Mize and Manning and Skubal have had. When it comes time for them to be extended, if they earn it, they don't have the big body of work to go get the massive paydays, really. I mean, there's still going to be a little bit of question mark around them. So Detroit might be able to kind of keep them at less money than if they really flourished early on.
yeah, and it's the payroll is so small for Detroit that they could throw out all sorts of money and still survive. It's just are they gonna? It doesn't seem likely, but we'll see. We talk about the three batters already. Torque, Carpenter, Green looking real, but they do have the three other. I guess you could throw four interesting guys up in Toledo. Now that Winslow Perez was promoted, you've got Perez, you got Meadows, you got Colt Keith, of course, and Justin Henry Malloy. You can get one or two of those guys to actually come up and perform.
Yeah.
Suddenly it's 4 or 5 young members of the core, and it feels a lot more like a real team. So
now you got a lineup. Now you can go out in free agency and get a couple of decent guys or even a platoon bat. And now you got 6 guys in your lineup. Now you can score some runs.
Yeah.
That would be something.
I mean, that was a great point, Jai. Wasn't the 2, 3, 4 hitters? Didn't they have basically all the hits?
They were 7 for 9, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Zach Short, about the only other hit.
That's right. Zach Short had the big home run. That shout out to our buddy Jeremy, who's known as Who Trying to Ball in the Discord. He was right there with his dad, and the ball that Zach Short hit went off the foul pole and hit his dad in the stomach. Do you see? And
Nice.
there's like this agony of like, oh, that hurt a little bit, and oh, I dropped the ball, it fell down.
He
I made
didn't
a
get
GIF
the ball.
of it, but no, I don't think they did. But yeah. But yeah, I mean, so I guess we kind of went from in those weekends games to coming back to trade chat. But yeah, it was the Tigers won on Sunday because of course they did, because they can't lose or win more than 2 games in a row. I don't know if today's game counts as 3 in a row because they did officially sweep the Giants. It just was 3 months later. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of the strangest things that this team, they play these solid games, and then we saw on Saturday, and I've seen a lot of questions about this. The Matt Manning pitched 2 innings, and then the rain came, and they didn't send him back out. But the Padres sent out their
Rookie
AA pitcher, and he went just fine. Meanwhile, the Tigers brought in Mason Englert, who basically threw batting practice, and then today they put him on the IL, and AJ Hinch said, they've been concerned about his fluctuating velocity from start to start. And so the question is like, well, why did you leave him out there for so long? What I know, at a certain point you got to take your lumps, but I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on Englert or the way Hinch managed the weekend.
Yeah, we did have a question about that. So, but yeah, I mean, he gave up 9 runs and 2 1/3 innings pitched. It was rough. I mean, we don't know if the injury was bothering him, but I don't know. Maybe it was just injury concerns with Manning. He's been injured. They didn't want to sit him down and bring him back out. But I mean, I think it was just they wanted him to eat up some innings is probably what I would take from that, and I guess it really didn't work out.
I it would be interesting to know, did Manning throw underneath? I don't know if they have a mounds down there, a throwing area down, in the concourse down there where the players go. But did he throw much during the break, and was he ready to go? And what was the final decision? What made the final decision? I can see being conservative there and not bringing him back out. because again, I don't believe this team's going to the playoffs, so that's okay have some kid gloves with him. But if you really want to win the game, though, I think they're up 2-0 when the rain came. And I believe the top of the order was coming up for the Padres. I would come with Cisnero or somebody like that in that area. And, get one of your better relievers out there, or Holton, even, whatever. And let's go with him. Let's get through that tough spot in the order and keep this thing moving a little bit. But he came out with Englert, and as you said, it was batting practice, and that's all she wrote.
Yeah, you guys were, like you were saying, maybe like the Tigers weren't competing, and we were kind of getting to, you said you don't see them winning the division. I think it's at the point where they're solid, but they're just not good enough to really be able to get over that hump. I think obviously the injuries and that 9-game losing streak did them in. I remember they were 25-26, and then things kind of fell apart from there. They sit 8 games back right now. We did have a talk about like the race in the AL Central, though. Like, are we pretty much given up on that? Like, I think there's 6.5 games out now. Minnesota's won a couple games in a row. Like, kind of just your overall view on the race in the Central, and are we going to see the Tigers kind of fall out of the race in the next weeks or months to come?
Well, I mean, I think if and when they trade Erod and Lorenzen, it's going to be really hard to maintain this sort of 500 level of play. And I don't think the Twins are going to go on a huge slide, and the Guardians, to the point where you can overtake them by playing a 500 ball. So the Tigers would need to go on an 8-10 game winning streak or something like that, and they just don't seem consistent enough for that, right? Like, we've seen some really quality games. Today was a good one. Sunday was a good one, but then you got Saturday, and they don't have quite the firepower to come back from a game like Friday. So it's just really tough. And I think Minnesota is they're starting to play better. Friend of the family, Alex Kirilloff, was the AL Player of the Week. That was nice to see from a personal perspective, not from an AL Central Tigers perspective. But so he's playing really well for him now, and yeah, I think they just have a little bit too much talent for them to go on a sort of slide. But then again, we've seen it all year long that these teams can't seem to put anybody away.
It really boils down to the offense for me, because the three of us just talked about the 3 guys who are forming a nice little core. However, until Zach Short's home run today, they had 3 runs on the board. And if they would have hung on and won with precisely 3 runs, that would have been, I believe, their 5th consecutive win where they scored precisely 3 runs. So they haven't exactly been blowing teams off the field. Okay, all credit to the pitching staff here that has made 3 runs hold up several times over the last week. Because you score 3 runs a night, you're going to lose some games. I mean, let's face it, most of the time. And they lost the one game to San Diego 14-3. So 3 runs has been their magic number. They just won most of them. But that's not something I would bet on. So I still think offensively the team is short. I think we know this, right? Even with those 3 guys starting to look good, and Jake Rogers, to be honest, starting to look good. A lot of numbers, people showing his numbers since June 1 are pretty solid. So I think he's made some changes to me. So, but I think in the term of winning the division, I just don't think they have the offensive firepower to get it done.
Yeah. And I think Scott Harris knows that. I don't think that they're going to make any silly decisions to try to go for the division, even as much as we'd all love to have a pennant chase, a division chase, playoff chase, just play meaningful baseball into September. Boy, that'd be amazing. Fun again. We haven't had that since 2016.
Yep.
And but it's just you have to know the reality of your ball club. Now, some people could argue like, hey, you didn't even try by bringing up the young guys. But as much as we all would love to see that, people just underestimate the difference between minor leagues and the major leagues by a huge margin. They underestimate it. Like why Jace Young. We'll talk about him, right? So he's finally up in Double-A area. People were calling for months and months, but why wasn't he up? Because he only hit 250. That's why. Because you're in high A and you're hitting 250, and people go, "Oh, it doesn't matter. The OPS is good, the on base is good, the power is good." All that's true, but you have to still get hits. And when he gets Double-A, he's not going to get as many hits. It's going to be like 230, 235. and then he gets the AAA, it's gonna be like 215, 220, and then what do you do? Like, so I don't know. You can bring Cole Keith up right now. He's really struggling over the last 2 weeks. Maybe he needs that to adjust and to come up later and help the team. But I just think there's not enough there for them to make a real run in any way, and it'll be kind of annoying to watch Cleveland and Minnesota trip over each other. I mean, Cleveland just put Bieber on the 60-day IL, I believe.
Yeah.
They've had a lot of pitching injuries this year. It'll be curious to see if they make the decision to sell, even though they are in much better shape to try to contend for the division.
Yeah, it's looking like low 80s. I mean, maybe if you win 82 games, that might be the magic number. It's crazy, but I mean, to be fair, the Tigers have hung in there, and just like you said, having a competitive team, hopefully into September. I mean, even if they do trade some pieces, I still think with them getting healthy, I think they can still be a respectable team. Now, does that amount to 70 wins, maybe 75 wins? I think they're probably somewhere in there, but I think hopefully if they could stay around, 5 to 10 games under 500 throughout the year, and we continue to see some development from the young guys, and I think that's a successful season. I think this season has been very successful for the Tigers in the sense that the progression we've seen from Green, Torkelson, you now have Skubal and Manning back, and some of these trade ships have performed very well. Like Michael Lorenzen, trade value, I don't think could be any higher right now with the month of July he's had. So I do think that it's been a positive season and a building block for them moving forward.
Yeah, sorry. Roger's been texting me during this. He sent me. There was something about the Tigers supposedly interested in Alek Thomas from Arizona, which
that'd be fun.
Well, Arizona has a ton of outfield depth in their system.
They do, but yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to if Alek Thomas for what? Because I don't think they'd give up Alek Thomas for half a season of Eduardo Rodriguez, but maybe Rodriguez and a reliever. I don't know.
Yeah, Rodriguez and Lorenzen maybe. Like
you could double up their arms. Yeah, sure. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't looked at Alek Thomas's stats. He's a tiny little guy that's similar to Corbin Carroll, except without the surprising pop. But yeah,
he got off to a slow start, I think, this year, and I think he got hurt for a little while. But he had some moments last year when they brought him up. And
yeah, that would be an interesting one. It's another. He's a lefty, right? Left-handed.
Yeah.
So he's a 23-year-old, 200 at bats this year, 6 home runs, 765 OPS.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, 619 OPS and 381 at bats. So hasn't really figured it out at the major league level yet, but still young, and I believe he was a pretty highly touted prospect as well.
765 OPS. Where's that rank on the Tigers? That's probably pretty good.
Yeah, that's probably. It would be. I'd be curious if he would be like overall much of an upgrade over someone like Badu, but
not really, honestly.
I like
Badu
they have that
lately,
Canzone, Dominic both the Dominics, Fletcher and Canzone.
Yeah. They got a bunch of Dominics over there.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, Arizona was one of the teams that we thought might be a landing spot for some of the pitching because they are competing, right? And they could use some arms, but that'd be a fun name to play around with. It certainly add some talent to the system.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We did have a question that kind of bleeds into that. If you want to get to that on Twitter, so there's a lot going into this question, but I think it's a good one. So he asked for predictions. Who's the best teams who are the best fit for Eduardo Rodriguez, Michael Lorenzen, and Jose Cisnero? So yeah, we were just talking about like Arizona. I think they're a good fit. I don't know how much you guys look at Baltimore. I've heard they've been sniffing around. Maybe they could be a good fit for those guys. But was there any teams kind of for those veteran pitchers we think are going to get traded? Any teams other than kind of the ones we've already mentioned?
Well, Relio and I did a 2-part trade piece over at the Tigers Minor League Report website, naming some teams where Erod might be a fit. I think the Dodgers, they've had so many pitching injuries, and you might end up, if you trade with them, you might end up getting another young pitcher, which is not the worst thing in the world. Everybody wants bats, but you can use arms too. the one reason I mention them is, they're in a division race with the Giants and the Diamondbacks, and the Giants and the Diamondbacks are two of the worst teams in baseball against left-handed pitching this year. So if you have any more heads-up matchups against them, maybe that helps a little bit. As we saw Skubal kind of dominate the Giants today, they don't hit lefties very well. So that could be a reason for the Dodgers. I also mentioned the Astros. I think they could really use either Lorenzen or Rodriguez. Honestly, they've had so many pitching injuries, and they're a really good team, and they've got managed to fight their way through it. But I think they'd be a fit for all three of those guys. Honestly, they could use Cisnero too for fun. Raj brought up the Brewers. I think the Brewers would be a great fit. They always manage to compete without ever really making big splashes on players, at least not in the last 10, 12 years. Once upon a time they traded for CC Sabathia and Zach Greinke and stuff, but they were always pretty much expiring deals. So I think Erod would make sense there, and there's some fun players in that system. So, and then of course Baltimore. There are a lot of landing places for these guys. So I think the Tigers are in a good position there to get at least some solid talent.
Yeah, I have to believe Erod brings back at least one player that we're like, hey, that's pretty good. I mean, that's something they can work with, And I don't know who that's going to be, but I just look at Baltimore and the depth of their system. If there's any kind of, I can't imagine there's actually a bidding war. That's too strong of a thing, but there's a lot of teams who want Erod. They should have no problem picking out a prospect that is pretty attractive, but is kind of superfluous to what they need because they have a lot of guys. So I've been really looking at Baltimore. And then I really think the Rays and Cisnero could be a good match because they love doing funky things with relievers. And I think Cisnero does some things that you could really work with in their system and be the kind of guy who he can help them get to the finish line this year.
Yeah, and for Steve's question, it was like a 3 or 4 parter. He did ask about the Orioles and like prospects that we could be interested in. I saw something about Kobe Mayo, third base prospect that the Tigers could be interested in. Was there any young players that they had in their system that kind of stand out to you that could maybe interest the Tigers?
Well, the best ones are on the team already. They've done a heck of a job promoting everybody. I mean, Colton Cowser's up and Westberg is up. Obviously, Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson are already there. They've done a lot of promoting. So, but Connor Norby, right?
Yeah.
Maybe having a down year, but certainly a prospect worth noting. I can't imagine they would move Yerstead yet, but he's there. They just have a lot of. You can go pretty far down their list and find some talented guys.
Yeah, and I'll give credit to Rogelio for this one. There's a kid named Cesar Prieto in Baltimore system who is not one of their top 10 prospects, but he is like in their top 30, top 15.
Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of a Luis Arias player. Like he's a second baseman, third baseman, and he just hits. He hits like crazy. He's super annoying to play against. He's got some speed, a little bit of pop. He would be a solid prospect. Like he's the sort of guy that if the Tigers traded and they got him, everyone would be all upset because he's not one of their top 10 prospects that they've heard of. And then he'll come up and he'll hit 330, and people go, "Oh, well, this is all right." So he would be an interesting name. Kobe Mayo is a fun one because he's a big power hitting third baseman, maybe first baseman down the line, maybe corner outfielder. But yeah, I think you mentioned Connor Norby. They've got Hudson Haskin. They got Judd Fabian. They've got a lot of interesting names out there in the outfield and in the infield. They have a surplus, and they can use it to get major league talent. Will they? I don't know. We haven't seen Michael Elias do that yet. They traded. Who did they trade to get Fujinami? Nobody. Like I don't remember.
Yeah.
Like
I don't think Fujinami was even having that great of a season either.
he's
After the switch, he got better.
Yeah, he's got a huge arm, and he was terrible as a starter, and he'd been pitching better out of the bullpen. I mean, we saw him dominate the Tigers for an inning. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I was listening to as we were coming back from South Bend the other day. I was listening to the Ballpark Dimensions podcast, and it was kind of their trade special. They were going through and looking at teams and who they could trade and what they might be able to get, and they just kind of glossed over the Tigers. They didn't think about the Tigers at all, really, which makes me wonder if at a national level maybe we're overrating Rodriguez and Lorenzen. But they spent a lot more time talking about like Lucas Giolito
Ooh.
and Marcus Stroman, and so maybe the Tigers. I don't know. It depends on what the asking prices are for those other guys, but maybe we're overestimating what the Tigers can get.
Well, is Giolito a rental too, or
He would
is
be,
it-
yeah.
he
He's
would
a
be?
free agent.
I mean, if you're Baltimore and you're in first place, you're looking like you're a 90+ win team. I mean, I'm not gonna say you go all in, but if you have a chance to make some noise in the playoffs, I mean, not every year. I mean, especially in the division they play in, when you've got teams like the Yankees, the Blue Jays, I think have a lot of talent still. The Rays, like, I'm not saying you go all in, but and if they don't win the division in that wild card series, it's a best of 3. I'm pretty certain that Eduardo Rodriguez would be their probably 1 or 2 starter in a best of 3. Even if they were to get like Michael Lorenzen, he could maybe be their number 3 or 4 starter in a division series. Like, to me, you have an opportunity to win this division. I say they have to make a move because they didn't in the offseason. And I think with this surplus of like infield prospects that they have, I think it would be I think it would raise some eyebrows for them, especially with their rotation. I'm not saying it's necessarily weak, but I think compared to some of the other like true World Series contenders, I think there's a little bit to be desired with them.
Well, there's no question. When you look at the tail end of their rotation, they can upgrade, and they should be able to upgrade without a big problem, right? And I think Erod would definitely slot in as their number 2-3 guy right now, no, without any question. So if they want to they've moved in the first place. They're legit. That's a good division. They're in first place. The Rays are starting to suck a little bit of wind. Why wait? Why say this isn't the year? It could be the year.
And another part to Steve's question was Michael Lorenzen to the Giants, because he said, I mean, it doesn't have to be a Lorenzen, just like the Tigers making a trade with the Giants, with Scott Harris being familiar with their system. We've heard the Giants in some trade rumors. Was there any prospects or players you think that could interest the Giants? I mean, the Giants do have a lot of depth at the major league level too. I mean, maybe there's a bat that maybe is not getting an opportunity. Could there be a potential trade with the Tigers and Giants? And if so, are there any names that could interest the Tigers?
Yeah, the Giants was another one of the teams that I did some fake trades with, and I I did it last week, and I've already forgotten who I had them trading for. It wasn't a terrific fit, as I recall. I mean, I like some of their young talent. You'd love to get Luis Matos, right? Their center fielder, but that's I don't think that's happening. Who did I have them taking? I had them getting Carson Wisenhunt, who is a lefty pitcher who's trending up this year,
Mm-hmm.
and outfielder Grant McCray, who's really tooled up, but has some high strikeouts. They say with his strikeouts, though, it's not necessarily a chase problem. It's more swinging and missing in the zone, which is arguably worse. But
That's worse.
yeah, but he'd be the second piece. You'd be getting Wisenhunt, who is a lefty he's always had a plus changeup, but his velocity's up to 94, 97 now. So those are the 2 names I came up with. The Giants don't have a great system, like in terms of depth. Certainly not like some of the the Reds, the Orioles we're talking about. And somebody asked earlier, excuse me if I'm interrupting, Noah Conley, he said, do we like Carlos Jorge? Carlos Jorge would be great. He's a 19-year-old second baseman in the Red system, hitting for power, hitting for speed, walking a ton. He'd be awesome. I don't know if the Reds would go for that for a rental, but yeah, I think the Giants do fit again because they're in a division race and they need some help. But I couldn't come up with a ton of they've got a kid named Von Brown who's he's more like 25 now. He's got a lot of tools, but he's also a high swing and miss guy. So I don't know if it fits what we think the Tigers are looking for.
Well, I think today was their 5th or 6th straight loss,
The
right?
Giants.
And if they go home now, if they have a lousy week, I mean, that might talk them out of doing a lot of shopping too. So we'll just have to see what next few days bring.
And they have Conforto and Peterson, right, on 1-year deals, so they could end up trading them. They could be the that's the left-handed power bats or whatever that you like.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the last part to his question was, he said Cisnero to the Rays. So kind of read your guys' mind there. And then he said the Dodgers reacquiring Zach McKinstry. I don't really know how much trade value McKinstry would have. I mean, does he even get a top 10 prospect in anyone's? I mean, he does have years of control, but I feel like he's more of like a bench piece on like a team truly trying to compete.
Yeah, I mean, McKinstry hasn't played terribly well. I mean, he's still a solid defender, basically all over, and he'll still get you some hits. But pitchers seem to have figured out that if you throw him breaking balls down and in, he can't lay off them. He swings and misses at all of them. I don't know the last time he walked. But a team that could use a versatile utility guy might trade for him. I don't know that you're going to get a whole lot more for him than you gave up. You gave up what a double-A reliever. You probably get something along those lines. Maybe a little bit more than that. Maybe if you wanna do the, buy low, sell high stock thing and get a little bit more talent, then go for it. But I think at this point they're probably better off just keeping McKinstry and maybe he sticks around and plays less next year and performs better because you've got a slightly better roster overall. I don't know.
I could see him long term being a better version of Don Kelly, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I was literally going to say that.
You got to be quick around here, John. You got to be quick.
You read my mind.
Well, anyway, he had the home run stolen from him today. I mean, that was a really nice swing. I saw him get the triple in Kansas City, and he hit a couple other balls hard in the two games I was at. So, I mean, I think he might be coming back a little. I think he's been a little bit better the last 2 weeks. But you're right, he doesn't walk. And I saw this a month ago or more. That down and in breaking stuff is just a kryptonite to him, like you would not believe. And he hasn't done much to address it.
Yeah, I think like I was gonna say Don Kelly, just like I think he's a good clubhouse guy too. Like I remember seeing him like mic'd up. He seems like a guy that's always having fun, just a good guy to have around. And like he's been a decent enough hitter, slightly under league average. Can play a lot of different positions. Like I think he's a guy you keep around and bring off the bench, especially when, I mean, unless there's like someone just wows you with a deal or a prospect. Yeah, I would predict he's probably going to be on the Tigers for the rest of this year and probably next year and maybe even the next couple of years after that.
But yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily rule out like a team like the Astros, right? Where you give them Lorenzen and they also would like, hey, we sure would like a lefty utility bat. You go, okay, well, sweeten the deal a little bit. Let's get Joey Loperfido.
Yeah.
And then, you get that and you're fine with it. But yeah, I don't see him having a huge trade value on his own. Maybe there's that Alex Avila throw in value, but John, that's a reference to when they traded Alex Avila. Who else did they trade to the Cubs?
Justin Wilson for Paredes and Candelario.
Yeah, there you go. That's the one. Yeah. So, and yeah, Alex Avila was like, yeah, we could use a catcher too. So, all right, here you go.
That was a good trade for. I mean, the Tigers got two pretty darn good hitters in that trade.
They did. They just didn't do a whole lot with them, unfortunately.
They bailed a year early.
Had a good year, but yeah. So I don't know. I mean, we're certain that there are going to be some trades coming up. I don't know. Rogelio and I are going to Erie this week. We were going to go Friday and Saturday, but there's a presidential rally on Saturday, so we're going Thursday, Friday instead.
Nice.
And then we're going to come back and try to hit Jackson Job's debut in West Michigan because that's one of the other things we didn't. There were some promotions. We mentioned Winslow Perez went up to AAA, which is good. He's been playing much better over the last month or so. And Jace Young backfilled there to get to AA Erie, which people have been wanting. And then Luke Gold went from low A Lakeland up to high A West Michigan. And Luke Gold's a guy that he really, really struggled last year and for the first month and a half this year. And then for the last 2 months, he's just been absolutely raking, hitting like 370 with power and walks, which is what you want a college guy to do in low A. So it's a well-deserved promotion for him. And then Jackson Job is that's really exciting because I don't know about you guys, but when they announced his back injury, I was pretty convinced that he wasn't going to play at all this year.
It would have been no great shock if this had been a completely lost year. And it may not be as full a developmental year as everybody would have loved to have seen, but now they're at least getting him on a track with some optimism.
Yeah, I think like the back injury could be a little worrisome, but I still think for him, he's so young. Like, I don't think we need to rush him by any means. I still think he could easily be in the minors for another 2 to 3 years. And at that point, he'll be calling up when he's Oh, what you were shaking? Why are you shaking your head, Ufer?
Pitcher's break, dude. If he's ready, you go. He's 21, isn't he? Is he 21 now?
He's 21.
He's 21. Yeah.
Oh,
He's
hell.
older than, he's older than AJ Smith Shaver.
Hey,
He just happened. He was old for his class.
yeah. Next
but,
year.
but he's young in terms of innings.
He's baseball young. I get it.
He's
But
20, so he's 20 years old. He'll be 21 in July 30th. So a couple of days.
He's getting outs in Erie next year. He's on a ticket to Detroit by July.
I mean, you'll move him as fast as he allows you to. His first couple outings down in Lakeland were nothing terribly special, but we saw the pitch data, and the pitch data remains absolutely bonkers. And the last couple outings, he really was shoving. And yeah, I went through and went through all the baseball savant stuff, and you could see his slider, which I believe in his most recent outing they said he threw 4 sliders, and I went through and looked at it. I'm like, no, he threw 20. You've mislabeled like 15 of these as cutters because. And this is interesting, and I don't know if this is a new development or he was just feeling it that day, but his slider had been averaging 83 miles an hour, and then his most recent start, it was 86. So wow. I understand that why they labeled it as a cutter, but his cutter is normally 90 to 92, so it was not his cutter. But yeah, so far he's thrown 40 sliders this year, gotten 18 swings, gotten 12 swings and misses. He's got a 67% whiff rate on his slider. The ball's been put in play once against the slider this year. His fastball's sitting 97, touching 99 with elite spin rate. The cutter looks really good. At least the numbers do. The changeup is developing well. It's just about him getting innings and getting more comfortable with command because the stuff is going to be nasty if he can stay healthy.
Yeah.
And thank you, Joseph Schweitzer.
Yes, I was gonna get thank you, Joseph, for the $4.99. He said, for all of you being way better than Mike Valeni and 97.1, he said, and any job apps. What is that?
Kidding. He wants to work with us.
Yeah,
well, I don't know. That's Rogelio is the sniffing and HR department.
Yeah.
But no, we appreciate that. I it's nice of you to say. Mike Valenti is a very talented gentleman.
Yes.
His outlook on life and on sports is not, congruent with mine, but I don't deny him his talent as a radio personality. But so we're excited to go see Job. Excited to see Young and the guys in AA. I really want to get out there and I want to talk to Justice Bigby, and I think Raj wants to talk to Lyle Lockhart. Some of these guys that are kind of under the radar but performing really well. So
I got Colt Keith coming to Des Moines next week.
That's right. Somebody was asking if you were going to head out to Iowa to see Colt Keith and Parker Meadows and all those fellas.
Right now I'm going on Tuesday night and Wednesday afternoon. And then usually I kind of get the bug to go one more time. I'll fit one more in and make sure I get to 3 out of the 6 for sure.
Nice. I still remember seeing you in the crowd a couple years ago.
Yes.
Just munching on some peanuts, watching.
It was a cold night. It was a cold night, and I moved down right behind the dugout.
I'm sure we have a clip of it somewhere.
Yeah, I want to see a picture of that.
I mean, that was the Iowa, the Toledo team with. At that point, I think they had Green and Torkelson, and then Kreidler was out there looking like Brooks Robinson. He had like the most impressive defensive weekend of all time. It was insane.
And they had those 3 guys, plus Lester was raking. Yeah. Daz Cameron was raking. Zach Short was on the team. Clemens was on the team. I mean, they had a lot of big leaguers in the Mud Hen lineup. Those are actually fun trips to watch the Hens.
Cody Clemens just had a really nice week for Lehigh Valley against Toledo, and I don't know. That's why we don't need to get into it too much. But when I see Jace Young, I see Cody Clemens. I see that's that level of player, which is not the worst thing in the world, but it's not ideal for a first rounder.
Did Cody Clemens? I mean, Jace Young. The last month has been solid. I think we all agree, right? He's looked very good. Did Cody Clemens ever really have a month like that in the low minors?
That's a good question. I don't know. He tended to hit between 230 and 270 with 200 ISO and double digit walk rate. But yeah, I mean, I think Young's probably a slightly better pure hitter. He tends to go to the opposite field a little bit more. I think he's going to hit a lot of balls off the left field wall in Erie, which will be helpful. But I also think Clemens is actually a better athlete.
Yeah,
and more versatile. So
it is fun to watch Young run.
Yeah, I mean,
it's quite the sight. I kind of enjoy it.
I mean, you give him credit for he's not, he's trying. It's just the lower half doesn't always agree with what the brain wants him to do. But yeah, John, I can find. I'm sure I can find it somewhere where we got a video of it was somebody like hit a home run. You can see Yoop in the background.
Well, while you're doing that, we did have one more question. I know we're coming up on an hour, but
That's all good.
so it was from Tristan or Tristo19 said, who do we think is the closest team out of the Central to become more of a certified contender in the next few years? Would you consider the Tigers if they added some free agents and prospects? So, I mean, kind of with the theme, because this podcast was named like the race in the Central, kind of, is there a team that you could see in the next couple of years out of the AL Central that could become a true contender? And would the Tigers be in that discussion as well?
What do you think, Yoop?
Well, they're all starting at kind of a base level, right? I don't think there's obviously we've talked about this. There's not a powerhouse in the bunch. I don't think there's a top 10 farm system in the bunch right now. So they're all starting fairly even. You can make the argument the Royals are starting well behind because they look pretty woeful. I just watched them for 2 days and it was pretty toothless. The White Sox, if they deal as many people as they're starting over, and they don't have a great system, so you can kind of eliminate those two. You got to always, until they prove differently, you kind of have to believe the Guardians are going to be able to produce pitching to keep themselves afloat. If they stop, they stop. But right now they haven't stopped. They keep generating enough pitching to stay competitive. If they get lucky on a couple of hitters or bring in the right guys, then sure, they're probably the team I think has the best chance of building a contender. Minnesota has just been kind of snake bit with injuries, like Royce Lewis and obviously Byron Buxton and others. They can just never seem to bring it together. But the division this year might be weak enough where they're going to win just by being there. But I'm not that impressed with their system overall to build a contender. Detroit has the ability. They have the wherewithal. They have the ownership with the money. They have the low payroll to start with now. They have some pieces in the minors like a Colt Keith and some others that we've mentioned. They have young guys in the lineup, and they have these pitchers coming back. I mean, what is Casey Mize going to be a year from now? If he's good, then that changes the outlook of the team, really. So I think Detroit can win this division starting next year if they're aggressive.
Yeah, I think the Tigers definitely, I'm not going to say they'd be at the top of my list, but they'd have some interesting pieces. And I think like the White Sox, they're probably going to build around Luis Robert. But in terms of like the rest of their farm system, I know they have Colson Montgomery, I believe is how they have him as kind of their top prospect. Other than that, I mean, you have Dylan Cease, Tim Anderson's been pretty dreadful. Eloy Jimenez is not really breaking out the way they wanted him to. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I mean, the Twins do have Correa for the long term. They do have Buxton for the long term. Alex Kirilloff has been really, really solid. Edmund Julian, I think is how you. I don't know how to pronounce it. Yes,
Edouard Julien. He's from Quebec, I think. But yeah, he went on a boy. Did he go on a bender? It was 6 home runs and 17 at bats or something. I tend to think because I don't think the Twins necessarily have any big expiring deals, do they? I think maybe Max Kepler's a free agent, but I don't know when
Sonny Gray.
Is Sonny Gray a free agent after this year?
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, it's weird because like I don't picture the Twins getting a whole lot better, but I also don't picture them getting a whole lot worse. I feel like they're going to be about this level. So I do feel like the Tigers are probably decently poised to take a big leap forward if they can get a couple more bats going and fill in trades or free agency. And we know the free agent class is not very good, but I don't know. I don't see any reason why the Tigers can't, as you said, start competing for real next year because they're not that far away in this division, and nobody else is screaming like, "Hey, we're on the rise." It felt like 3 years ago, like the White Sox were going to be that team, and as the White Sox do, they just kind of frittered it away in a comical fashion that we all enjoy. And with Cleveland, as you said, that the pitching, they find these guys, Tanner Beebe, Gavin Williams, terrific arms. Just get some bats in there, but they don't seem to. I don't know. Their organizational philosophy is seemingly against getting guys who can hit for power. They just spent We love the Alex Mooney kid, from Orchard Lake, went to Duke. Great story there, but he's a classic Cleveland player. He's very little power, got some defense, gonna steal some bases, get on base, all that good stuff, but not an impact bat. So that's just who they target. And it all
Cleveland.
comes together occasionally. They got to the playoffs last year, right, with the Stephen Kwans of the world, but I don't know.
I think Cleveland, their number one goal is to cash the revenue sharing checks. To be honest, I mean that's just kind of who they are.
They it still baffles me that they did not go all in on Francisco Lindor, because that's the exact sort of guy you build your franchise around. Again, this is me, having those weird feelings about stars in your team and wanting to lock them up. And maybe in the long term that was the right thing not to do that. But they did get Jose Ramirez, which kind of shocked me. He took, I think, a big pay cut.
I think he
to do
did.
that. One of the best players in baseball over the last decade that doesn't quite get his due because of where he plays. But yeah, I don't know. I don't see any reason why the Tigers can't be real contenders next year.
Yeah, I think for like the Guardians, I think they're gonna trade Bieber eventually, but like they can develop pitching. We've seen that. I think they'll continue to do that. Gavin Williams, they have Tanner Beebe, and they do have some young hitters coming up. The prospect like George Valera, Gabriel Arias hasn't really broken out the way they wanted him to. I think what surprises me is they're not spending the money. They also really never made that like all-in trade like that I can think of. Like I remember it was Andrew Miller. I think they traded for him when they were competing for a World Series. But other than that, you don't ever remember them making that trade for like the big middle order bat that they've seemingly always needed, which is weird to me because it's like I understand not spending the money, but if they truly want to go all in, they have the prospects to make a trade like that.
Their team motto should be: "We do the minimum."
Well, so yeah,
Guardians,
John,
we are the minimum.
John, you were I think too young at the time, but the Guardians have been off and on good, largely good for the last 15, 20 years, right? They've had some downs for sure, but they were pretty heated rivals with the Tigers there in the late aughts.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that they made the biggest deal that they've made that I can remember for them was they traded for Ubaldo Jimenez. They had I think they traded two of their most recent first round picks, Drew Pomeranz and some other kid. And Jimenez, and so it was kind of like, oh boy, they're really going for it. And I think the Tigers' answer was to get Doug Fister or Sanchez. I don't remember which year it was, but they went for it that time, and it did not work out for them. The prospects they gave up didn't do anything either, but that's the last big deal I can remember them swinging.
Yeah, well, I know in 2013 the Guardians were a wild card team and they lost the wild card game, but yeah, I mean, I remember 2016 and 2017 they were true World Series contenders, and other than Andrew Miller, that's the only real like all-in move I think they made.
I think they had Rajai Davis there. And,
yeah,
I don't remember who else they were. Yeah, maybe I should know that team better, but. Yeah, it just doesn't seem to be in their DNA to really go all in on like that. They like to stock up on these middle infielders and let them filter through the system and see. Like Valera, you mentioned him. He was a really highly touted prospect going back 2-3 years ago, but it's kind of iffy now if he's even going to hit enough. He's a guy who his swing just doesn't lend itself to a lot of base hits, and then he was involved in and I don't know what the fallout was, but people said he shoved an ump down in the minors, and there was a big brawl at home plate, and I don't know what became yeah. It was really like the ump was just trying to keep the peace, and he kind of like went after the guy behind the ump, and it was like the ump was
ump was doing an honorable job, I'm sure.
Yes, I'm sure that. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, Tigers in 24. There you go.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate the free agent class is not that strong because it would be like the stars would kind of be aligning if there was some good free agents, but it doesn't. Well, I mean, we'll see what happens.
Oh, there's
back to you. You telling them to spend money the last 2 years.
Yeah,
Springer.
Exactly. The whole thing is they've done this to me. They went the Lynn Henning route where they got to get all the young guys in place and then they'll add. Why didn't you add solid talent and then add your young guys to them and have these bulwarks in your lineup to protect against the growing pains of the young guys? Why doesn't that make sense, Lynn?
I know. I do.
I love Lynn. I love Lynn Henning, I do, but
I do. It is.
I think he was wrong.
We joke about that a lot, and I do like a tongue in the cheek thing where within the Discord where I basically like anytime somebody's playing well, I'm like, oh, that's really going to increase his trade value. Like Jason Foley today really throwing hard to increase that trade value, and Tyler Holton looking good, making him a bigger trade chip. Yeah, it does feel like Lynn just wants to trade anybody as soon as they show any sign of talent. You trade them so that you get all your prospects up at the exact same time and go on a 6-year run, and that's it. But it doesn't work that way.
No, it really doesn't. And when you talk about free agency, yeah, it looks like a down class, but there's always a couple guys in there that you can find who can contribute.
Yeah.
So you just got to hope that Scott Harris is the guy who can identify them, and hope that Chris Ilitch is ready to spend the money. That's always, again, we always have to factor in. There's a level above the front office, and that is the owner, and they sign off. This little tiny payroll they have right now is something he signed off on.
Yeah, and I know we'll have plenty of time in the offseason to talk about free agency, but if we're talking about trade deadline, like Jamer Candelario is a name I think that's probably going to get traded. I'm not saying he's a good fit for the Tigers, but I mean he's a guy you probably don't have to commit to long term. And the Tigers, I feel like their biggest need is in the infield. So I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I don't know.
Well, I will.
It's
not going to happen.
No,
I think I was suspecting that maybe the Padres go after Candelario. They've been using Jake Cronenworth at first base, and he's not doing anything. He's a very talented player and has done a lot of good stuff before, but I think he might serve best as kind of a McKinstry type, right, where he's just playing all over the place, and you put Jamer at first. We know that some of his value is going to come from playing third, but that gives them because the Padres have a top 3 payroll, and it feels like they should sell based on where they are in the standings. They're closer to the Rockies, I think, than they are to the Dodgers. But I don't think they're going to sell because they're so heavily invested. So
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah. But maybe as a free agent signing, who knows? Maybe Jamer comes back on a 1-year deal.
I'm just gonna say if you heard it, you heard it here first, Jamer.
I often look to some of the things that the Giants did when Harris was there, or when Farhan Zaidi took over, and you see things like signing the Wilmer Flores, right? It wasn't a huge deal, or he's been a solid player for them. They traded for Tyro Estrada, that worked out well. They found Mike Yastrzemski. That the Tigers have tried to do that so far, trying to find these guys on the waiver wire and stuff like that, and maybe they did with Holton, but I don't know. Yeah, I think. Yeah, there might be 1 or 2 small free agent signings next year, but we'll see. Maybe they go all in on I'm blanking on his name, but the right-handed pitcher from the Phillies, who's very good.
Aaron Nola. That'd be wild. Yes. That'd be wild. That'd be like probably 6, 7, 8 years.
I would think 6 to 7. Yeah, probably 25 a year. So, but I don't know. He's pretty good. So
there's Ohtani guys out there. I mean,
yeah, that's true. The Tigers could pay him. They could pay him $600 million.
Sure. They could.
Yeah.
Nothing is stopping them other than their choice not to do it. Yeah. When Seattle, you just watch when Seattle pays them, you're going to know, well, why couldn't the Tigers done that? Yeah. I found out that Shohei has spent some off seasons in Seattle. Evidently, he loves Seattle.
That's a good fit.
There's inside info there from you.
Yeah. So people are thinking that he might just, if they cough up, he might go.
Yeah, that would make them pretty fun. Shohei and Julio Rodriguez.
Yeah.
You got the big dumper. You got Jared Kelenic there to kick your field goals and water coolers.
Exactly.
So
he was pretty broken up over that. Did you see that?
I did. That was going to be my ugly last week because just the way he'd been performing, it hadn't been great. He had that hot start. And then just to have that where you totally understand it. It's the sort of thing you do when you're frustrated and you're angry, and you do that, and then your moment of furor turns into 6 weeks of rehab, and it sucks. But anyway.
Yeah, but I'm sure we'll have plenty of off-season talk once the time comes. But
well, in the Tigers, so they're 3 games. Speaking of Ohtani, right? 3 games hosting the Angels this week.
And Ohtani's not pitching, right?
He is not pitching, but that just means that they have to figure out a way to strike him out or not give up.
I'm going to be interested. I want to see in a big moment, Tyler Holton versus Ohtani. I'm actually interested in seeing that because Tyler Holton just keeps on keeping on. I mean, you keep expecting, man, maybe this is the out where he has a rough outing. He never even has a shaky outing
It doesn't.
It's
Yeah, I
really-
was thinking earlier,
it's
like
very
when's the last
impressive.
time he got himself into trouble? I can't remember.
I said that. I said on Twitter last week. I never feel much stress when Holton's in the game. Most relievers there's a little consternation, like Alex Lang will scare the hell out of you sometimes. But
Yeah,
um,
that seems to be. You need that apparently to be the closer.
yeah, exactly. Tyler Holton, man, he's the quiet man.
Yeah,
I guess
and
we
like,
could be seeing the final starts for Rodriguez and Lorenzen in Tigers uniforms. It seems likely even.
well, yeah, so Eduardo Rodriguez pitches tomorrow, which is the 25th. So he might have one more start after this. I mean, they could.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
If I were a team looking to acquire him, I would say I want as many starts from him as possible. But who knows? Deadlines. I think you said before. Deadlines are there for a reason. They create demand.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, well, it was a good run if it is his last start tomorrow.
Well, it's gonna be a fun week. I look forward to it. There's gonna be. Hopefully, there's a lot of rumors. I hope we see some creativeness from Scott Harris, some prestidigitation. My favorite word, and make something really exciting happen. That would be quite a little cherry on top for the summer here.
Yeah, give us something good to talk about.
Yeah,
That'd be awesome.
The content gods. But yeah, I know. So I'm not sure what we're gonna. Since Relly and I are gonna be in Erie on Thursday, it may be the Skeleton Crew again. I don't know what's gonna happen. We'll play it by ear. If they make a trade, we'll probably do an emergency broadcast system. But yeah, I don't know. We'll check in. We'll keep you guys updated, and thank everybody for joining us today. Thanks again for the donation, Joseph. I believe it was right.
Yep.
And yeah, thanks you guys for joining me.
Yes. Thank you for hosting.
good time.
It was kind of a semi-host, but all right. We'll talk to you guys later. See ya.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.